Welcome to Payback with Silas. Every day, a new story, lies, betrayal, payback. Let's begin.
It was 6:07 a.m. when my marriage ended, not with a bang, but with a quiet notification on my phone. One soft chime, like any other morning email, except this one took 15 years and 1,000 small cuts to arrive. I was standing in the kitchen of our home in Middlebury, Vermont, barefoot on the cold oak floors, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, the other absently stroking the head of our golden retriever, Rufus, who dozed peacefully near the baseboard heater. The early sun was just beginning to push through the frost-covered windows, and the world outside still felt paused, quiet, still, clean. I glanced at my phone. The sender, Lydia Whitaker. The subject line, "We need to talk." My stomach didn't drop. My hands didn't shake. I didn't blink. I just knew. I tapped the screen and opened the message. Graham. I've struggled with how to say this, and I know there's no perfect way. So I'll say it plainly. I've met someone. His name is Marcus. He understands me in ways I forgot I needed. He sees me. I didn't go looking for this, but I also can't ignore it. I've tried to convince myself we could keep going, that I could keep pretending. But I can't anymore. I've already moved out. I left last night after you fell asleep. You'll notice the accounts have been cleared. I know it's abrupt. I've made sure you keep the house. It's signed over to you now. Everything else is final. I won't be coming back. Please don't try to find me. I need this new life to begin clean. I hope someday you understand. Lydia. I stood there for a long time. Not stunned, not exactly. More like, confirmed. Like watching a building collapse in slow motion when you'd already seen the cracks in the foundation years ago. My first instinct wasn't to scream or cry or curse. My first instinct, oddly, was to sit down. So I did. Right there on the floor, legs out, back to the cabinet, holding my coffee with both hands like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the ground. The silence in the house was so complete, I could hear the soft ticking of the analog clock in the hallway, a gift from our 10th anniversary trip to Charleston. She picked it out. Said it reminded her of something her grandmother used to have. I hated the thing. But I let it hang. Now it sounded like a metronome counting down the seconds until my old life disappeared entirely. But the strangest thing? There was no panic. Because deep down, I had known. Maybe not about Marcus, but I'd known Lydia hadn't been mine in a long time. Not really. The distance hadn't happened overnight. It was gradual. A look not returned. A conversation cut short. A hand pulled away in bed before it even made contact. For the last year, I'd been sleeping next to someone who was already gone. She just hadn't sent the email yet. I looked around the kitchen. Her mug was gone from the drying rack. Her keys were missing from the hook. The cookbook she always kept open to page 134, that god-awful miso cod she insisted on making every other Thursday, gone. Even the orchid on the windowsill had vanished. Only the dirt ring on the sill remained. She didn't just leave. She erased herself. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, but steady. I walked over to the drawer by the sink, the one where she said she left her house key. Sure enough, there it was. A single brass key, resting next to a folded receipt from a florist in Montpelier. I opened the drawer below it. Inside was a plain black folder labeled Banyan. Beneath that were three things: a trust document, signed and notarized, a schedule of asset transfers executed over the past 9 months, and a letter addressed to my attorney, sealed and ready. I had made that folder 6 months ago. Not because I expected this exact moment, but because I was done pretending I didn't see it coming. You see, Lydia and I had always been careful. Calculated, even. Our savings were neatly structured. She was the romantic between us, but I was the architect. And when the cracks began to show, when her business trips became more frequent and her explanations more vague, I didn't confront her. I prepared. I consulted a private fiduciary, restructured my equity from Whitaker Systems into a protected trust, opened silent holding companies, and shifted our shared savings into short-term CDs under my name only. All legally. All quietly. All methodically. She thought she cleared our accounts. She didn't even get close. I stood by the window, sipped the now cooling coffee, and looked out over our snow-covered yard. Rufus padded over and sat next to me, his head nudging my knee, eyes full of questions he couldn't ask. "I know, buddy," I said. "It's just us now." And that was okay. Because I hadn't been blindsided. I hadn't been broken. I had been waiting. And now that it had finally happened, now that she was really gone, I felt something unexpected rise in my chest. Not grief. Not rage. But relief. They say marriages don't die in a moment, they die in increments. In glances that linger too long on someone else. In dinners eaten in silence. In the slow disappearance of "we" from conversations. Ours had been dying for years. And I let it. Not because I didn't care. But because I already knew how the story ended. The first time I truly noticed something had shifted was on a Tuesday night, 2 winters ago. Lydia had just come back from a 3-day architecture symposium in Providence. She walked through the door in that long navy coat I bought her for Christmas the year before, the one she used to thank me for with kisses, back when we kissed for real. Not out of obligation. That night, her eyes were somewhere else. Distant. Focused on something behind me, or maybe just not here. "Everything okay?" I asked. She smiled. Polite. Thin. "Of course. Just tired." But it wasn't tiredness. It was absence. That quiet, creeping kind that no amount of sleep ever fixes. That night, she said she had to catch up on emails and went to bed early. I stayed up, staring at the leftover pasta cooling on the stove, the wine bottle unopened, the candles unlit. All 3 of them, untouched plans, a silent verdict on the kind of couple we'd become. There were other signs. Lydia started locking her phone. She never used to. Not because she had nothing to hide, but because she didn't think in terms of secrecy. She was careless with passwords, left tabs open, forgot to charge it, until suddenly, she was careful. Too careful. I'd catch her texting someone while she thought I wasn't looking, screen tilted just slightly away, face unreadable. She laughed more when she read those messages than she ever laughed with me anymore. I never checked her phone. Not because I was noble. But because I didn't need proof. The proof was already living in the air between us. By the time our 15th anniversary came around, we didn't even plan anything. Not even a dinner out. We both pretended not to notice. I bought her a necklace out of habit, left it in a gift bag on the table with a small note that said, "To what we've built." She never opened it. It stayed there for 3 days until I quietly put it in a drawer. She did send me a text, though. "Thanks for everything. Happy 15. That was it. It was during those weeks, in the cold stillness of late February, that I started preparing. Not because I thought she'd leave. But because I knew she already had. Emotionally, she was gone. I was just living with a ghost. And I'd be damned if I let the ghost take everything with her when she decided to vanish completely. I scheduled a consultation with an estate lawyer in Burlington. His office smelled like leather and old tax folders. He was gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and wore cufflinks with his initials engraved on them. "I'm not getting divorced," I told him. "Not yet." He just raised an eyebrow. "Then you're early." "That's smart." We talked for an hour. By the end of it, I had the outline of what would become my private safety net, a new LLC in New Hampshire, ownership transfers for Whitaker Systems back-end IP, a holding structure for dividends from upcoming contracts, and a carefully worded clause in our home deed giving me full custodial rights in the event of one party's abandonment. She never asked why I had so many new projects. She had stopped asking about anything. I remember one afternoon, early spring, we were gardening. Something we used to love. Lydia was crouched by the hydrangeas, pulling weeds, and I asked her, out of nowhere, "Do you still want to be here?" She didn't look up. Just kept digging. "Of course," she said. "Why wouldn't I?" It was the way she said it. Flat. Without thought. Like she knew it was the right answer, but didn't care if it was the true one. I nodded. Got up. Went inside. And that was the day I printed out the first version of the Banyan folder. I think the worst part of a dying marriage isn't the arguments. It's the polite silences. The unspoken agreements to not speak truths out loud. Lydia and I hadn't fought in over a year. We were just polite strangers with matching mail. And when the day came, when she left the key and sent the email, I wasn't angry. I was ready. Because the only thing worse than losing someone is losing yourself trying to hold on. And I hadn't lost myself. I'd been rebuilding, quietly, behind the scenes. Now it was time to begin again, not from scratch, but from something better. Something mine. Grief didn't hit me like a tidal wave. It came like snow. Soft, slow, cold at first, barely noticeable, and then one morning, you wake up and realize you're buried under it. The first few days after Lydia left were strangely functional. I cleaned the house. Answered work emails. Walked Rufus twice a day. There was something soothing about routine. It gave me rails to run on, kept me from drifting into the dark. But the silence inside the house, that was loud. There were no more shoes in the hallway. No half-used serums in the bathroom. Her books were gone from the nightstand, leaving behind little square outlines in the dust, a quiet reminder that someone had once built a life here, and now that life was vacant. At night, I'd sit on the edge of the bed, still on my side, out of habit. I didn't cry. I just sat. Let the stillness wrap around me like a heavy coat. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the garage. The place was a mess, half-full paint cans, old camping gear we hadn't touched since 2016, a cracked kayak hanging from the rafters like a forgotten trophy. But in the far corner, underneath a tarp, was something else. A motorcycle. Specifically, a '78 Triumph Bonneville I bought when I was 28, back before Lydia, back when I used to ride through the Berkshires on weekends with nothing but a leather jacket and bad decisions. I hadn't touched it in over a decade. She hated it. Said it was dangerous. Said it wasn't practical. But it was mine. And that night, in the quiet, I rolled it out into the driveway and just looked at it under the porch light like I was seeing an old friend again. My fingers traced the chipped chrome, the worn rubber of the handlebars. I didn't try to start it. Not yet. I just stood there for a long time. Breathing. Remembering. The next day, I made a list. Not a dramatic, reinvent yourself, kind of list, just 5 things I hadn't done in years. Simple things. 1. Take the bike to get serviced. 2. Cancel Lydia's wine subscription. 3. Go to the jazz bar in town. 4. Buy real food. Cook it. Eat at the table. 5. Talk to someone who doesn't work in tech. It wasn't about moving on. It was about moving at all. I checked off number 1 first. I pushed the Bonneville into the back of my truck and drove it to a local mechanic named Silas, a wiry guy in his 60s with oil-stained hands and a thick Vermont accent. "She's been sitting a while," he said, running a palm over the tank. "She's been asleep," I replied. He nodded like he understood more than I was saying. That night, I walked into a bar I hadn't set foot in since 2012. The Rust Note. Dim lights, cracked leather booths, a stage barely big enough for a trumpet and a dream. There was a woman on stage with silver hair and a voice like smoke. I sat at the bar, ordered a rye, and for the first time in months, didn't check my phone once. No one knew who I was. No one cared. And it felt incredible. I stayed until closing. the next few weeks became a quiet recalibration. Not a rebirth, I wasn't pretending to be 20 again. But I began to feel a little more like me. The real me. The version Lydia had loved at first, before we both tried to mold each other into something safer, more socially palatable, more stable. I called my brother, who I hadn't spoken to properly in almost a year. We laughed like kids. He said I sounded lighter. "You okay?" he asked. "I think I'm finally getting there." And I was. Because here's the thing no one tells you about heartbreak: if you let it hollow you out, and you survive that emptiness, you can choose what goes back in. And for once, I was choosing me. When Lydia left, she took the money she could see. What she didn't realize, what she never cared to understand, was that the real wealth wasn't sitting in our joint savings account. It was me. My mind. My patience. My work. The irony is, while she was running toward Marcus and whatever fantasy version of life he promised her, I was laying the foundation for something far more real. And now, finally, I was ready to build on it. Whitaker Systems had always been steady, not flashy, not headline-worthy, just solid. We specialized in cybersecurity architecture for small and mid-sized logistics firms, companies most people don't think about: refrigerated transport, industrial packaging, transcontinental warehousing. But those companies are the arteries of America's economy. And arteries need protection. 2 years ago, I'd quietly started developing a proprietary firewall protocol, something leaner, faster, built with predictive intelligence baked into the architecture. I called it Vanguard Zero. When Lydia started growing distant, I stopped trying to pull her back. I poured that energy into the code. Late nights. Cold coffee. Jazz in my headphones. No distractions. No apologies. And now it was ready. I didn't go to VCs. I didn't need to. Instead, I flew to Chicago and sat down across from Clayton Rhodes, CEO of Ardent Fleet Systems, a man who wore cufflinks like blades and had a habit of tapping his temple when he was calculating ROI. I showed him a live demo of Vanguard Zero in a simulated breach scenario. It stopped the threat before the third ping. He leaned back slowly, then said only 5 words. "How much equity are you keeping?" 80%, I said. Calm. Direct. He didn't blink. Just smiled. Good. I don't trust men who sell themselves cheap. We shook hands before the coffee even went cold. By the time I landed back in Vermont, the term sheet was in my inbox. A 7-figure investment with no board interference and a full dev team under my control. I stood alone in my kitchen that night, same spot where I read Lydia's email, and laughed to myself, not out of spite, but freedom. She thought she'd taken everything. But she never understood what I was really made of. I didn't post about it. Didn't gloat. Didn't send some poetic email about closure or karma. That's not my style. Instead, I went to the shed behind the house, the one she always wanted to turn into a pottery studio, and I tore out the shelving with my bare hands. Then I started converting it into an office. My office. Exposed beams. Steel desk. Clean light. A place built not out of nostalgia, but intention. A week later, I got a call from Silas at the shop. "She's ready," he said. The Bonneville was reborn. Matte black, tuned tight, humming like a machine with something to prove. I took her out that evening, helmet strapped, jacket zipped, and just rode. No destination. Just motion. I tore down Route 125, wind tearing past me, the roar of the engine louder than my thoughts. Somewhere outside Middlebury, I pulled off to the shoulder, cut the engine, and just sat there. The sky above was wide and clean. Stars sharp like pinholes in black velvet. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't just survive the collapse of my life. I was finally living it. It was a Saturday afternoon in late September when Lydia reached out again. Her name lit up my phone like a ghost walking into a room you've already cleaned and locked behind you. I hadn't heard from her since the email. Not a call. Not a word. But there she was. Lydia, one new email. Subject, just, wondering how you are. I didn't open it right away. I took a walk first. Rufus had a gray patch on his muzzle now, age catching up, but he still trotted beside me like a soldier on duty. I walked the trail behind my house, where the leaves had just started turning. Vermont's gold and crimson in full bloom. The kind of beauty you don't see when you're busy being miserable. By the time I returned, the message was waiting. Still unopened. I read it standing in the kitchen. Hey Graham. I don't really know what to say. I guess I thought about you today. A lot, actually. I've been wondering how you're doing. I saw something online about Whittaker Systems. Congratulations, I think. I'm not writing to make things complicated. I miss parts of us. The real parts. Maybe I didn't know what I had when I had it. I'm sorry for how I handled everything. Really. I hope you're okay. Lydia. That was it. No request. No drama. Just memory and maybe a little regret. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. But I was done looking backwards. I had a company to run now, 3 clients in contract, 2 more in negotiation. Vanguard Zero was already gaining attention in industry forums. Investors were offering money I didn't need. I hired a lean, sharp team, people who wanted to build, not just clock in. Most days I worked from the converted shed behind my house, coffee in hand, blues on vinyl. And I slept well. God, I slept well. One evening, I got invited to speak at a cybersecurity panel in Austin. I hadn't done anything public-facing in years, but I said yes. Not for the exposure, just because it felt like something the new version of me would do. After the panel, a woman from the audience came up and introduced herself. Her name was Nadine. She asked smart questions. She wore dark glasses and bright opinions. She didn't ask me what happened with my marriage. She didn't care. We talked until the lights came up. That was a good night. Not a fairy tale. Just a beginning. People always want to know, do you ever regret it? The years, the loss, the love? The truth? No. Because every chapter one lived brought me to this one. And this one is mine. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't beg for anyone's approval. It's just good. Quietly, steadily, good. She took the money. I kept the future. And I've never felt richer.